Hey everyone, welcome to another live session at the Reactor. My name is Rav and I'm the Program and Event Manager at Reactor London. Before we get into the session, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We're all here to learn, so please be respectful of other people's views. Please be kind and considerate. And the chat is open throughout, so we do encourage you all to participate. Today, we have the second episode of our Developer's Guide to Power Platform series. Today, we're going to be talking all about Power Apps. And this session will be led by Keith. But before I hand over to Keith, I actually want to talk to you about a cloud skills challenge we are running as part of this series. So please do join in the cloud skills challenge. This is just an additional learning. And all the topics we'll be covering in the Power Platform series are in this Cloud Skills Challenge. So this is just an extra homework for you. But yeah, please do join in the Cloud Skills Challenge. And now with that, I'm actually going to hand over to Keith. Hi, Keith.
All right.
Yeah, good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I thought your fancy graphics at the beginning are brilliant. You might have over-egged it a little bit, but we'll see where we go.
Well, I'm now going to hand it over to you. I'll be in the background. If you have any technical issues, just shout and I'll be there.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sure we'll manage. Hello, everyone. I'm Keith Watling. I do Power Apps. I still haven't quite figured out what that means yet, but I'm hoping to share what I've learned on my little journey with you so far. And hopefully, fingers crossed, might give you the confidence, the ability, the starting point, whatever it is you need to kick off your career, your journey, your change, or whatever it is you want to do with this fantastic new world of low-code, no-code application development. You see on a screen, it's funny. The first thing I saw when they put it up, I was like, God, that's a lot of code on the screen, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about low code, no code, and the first thing we're showing you is math flaws and funny words and sentences with way too much punctuation. That's the very definition of code, isn't it? Like just too many apostrophes and dots and brackets, or they call them parentheses, to make it sound more expensive. But really, it's just about distilling your wonderful brains and your problem-solving skills onto pieces of paper. So I'm just quickly going to share my screen with you all so you can see this is my wee Power Apps 101. Hang on a minute, make sure I'm screening just the right screen. There we go. So this is my 101 to Power Apps, right? And one of the things I want you to take away today is that you don't know all of the code. And you will never know all of the code, and you will probably never need to know all of the code. And any of the people out there who are pro coders and professional developers who say to you, I know all the code, it's not true. They're fibbing, because there's always some code that they don't know, and there's always a little bit that you don't know. So be comfortable with what you can do. And in Power Platform, the most difficult thing that you're going to come across, right, is that if you're a developer anyway, if you're a professional developer, the first thing you're going to come across that's really going to irk you is that it kind of works. Like there's no crazy error statements. When you go and learn like Python and all the rest of it and yada, you're going to kind of like come up across some pretty big hurdles where like stuff just doesn't work. In Power Platform, most of the time it kind of works. And when it doesn't work, it tells you why it's not working. There's a little kiss on the screen, but we'll get into that. So I want to cover off like some bits around Power Apps and what it's all about. And if you look at this from like why you're doing it, and I think the most important thing you can take when you come to Power Apps especially is like it's a bit of a steep learning curve, right? So you need a bit of encouragement to get going. You want to really make sure that you've got some people behind you backing you. And this is the main fella at Microsoft, Satya Nadella, right? He's a top lad. And he said a couple of years back that there will be 500 million apps built by 2023. That's next year. I don't think he's the sort of fellow who kind of guesses on his numbers. I'm pretty sure he's got some stats in his back pocket that says that that's about right, you know. And that's more than have been built in the last 40 years, right? So let's rewind a little bit. Let's look 40 years. So just before my old face was born, 40 years ago, someone else was building apps. In fact, the very first app, you know, built out of need in a business, right? Had to solve a problem, the Enigma code, right? And Alan Turing said in 1945 that we shall need a great number of mathematicians of ability. Now, I don't know how many of you on the call today who consider yourself a mathematician of ability like Alan was, and with the people who worked with him, with pen and paper, working out how to build the very first computers that we all know today. I mean, that's a mathematician of ability and a half, and he needs a great number of them, because what Satya just said, there will probably be a good deal of this kind of work to be done, right? So that's prophetic, wasn't it? That was quite sort of seeing into the future. And the problem is that there aren't enough people to go around to build the code, to go off and learn and like become absolute experts in writing code. Now, I'll tell you for why. Like, it's a really important fact, this. It is infinitely quicker for me to teach someone Power Apps and Power Platform than it is for them to teach me about their business. Okay, so just let that sink in for a moment, because it's really important, right? It is much faster for me to teach someone who knows their business about apps than it is for them to teach me about their business, right? So when I was a bus driver, yeah. You might be able to tell by my slight London twang that I was a red bus driver, right? So I was the first person to leave you behind and the last person to pick you up. But the point is that I had an expertise in my business, right? I had been the driver, I'd swept the buses out, I'd washed the buses, I'd helped fix the buses, I'd controlled the buses, I'd gone and cleaned up the accidents, I'd worked behind the counter to get drivers in and get bums on seats and get them out the door and do all the rest of the bits and pieces and deal with route performance and yada ad nauseum, right? And I'd spent about 10, 12 years doing that before I started writing my very first line of code there. And I did that in Visual Basic for applications with Excel, right? Now I went off and I went pretty crazy on that, and I did way too many Excel workbooks. But the point is I fundamentally understood my business. Now, halfway through that kind of journey, we got some people in to build some tech for us. We got some people in to build some apps, and it was quite a lot of money, right? We were trying to explain to them the intricacies of business, the KPIs, the measures, the metrics, telling them about how all the interlinkages worked and how the rules worked and how service control worked. You know, imagine having to control 100+ buses on the route with drivers changing over at various times, all got different finish times, all got legislative agreements, all got individual working agreements where they've been tupied from other businesses and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. Very, very complicated business to try and explain to a set of people who are coming to write code and charge you by the hour for doing so, right? Same internally as well. You know, you're trying to convey this to different parts of the business when they're coming to deliver you technology, and it's very difficult, right? So, you know, this is the number one thing I want you to take away today, is that you can become software developers much faster than you could before. That means that you can give the ability of software development to others faster, therefore you can turn the business around quicker. And these days, business agility and the digital imperative that we all face, you know, have to be digital first. We need apps. It needs to be now. It needs to be immediate. You have the ability to directly affect that either inside your business or inside other people's businesses. And if you do it inside of your business, you can forge yourself a new career like I did. Or you can go off and you can like help other people do it like I did, which is what I do now. I help other people make apps and I train other people and I do all the rest of it. And then Satya kind of came along this year So this is latest Satya. So we're fast forwarding from 2019, and we're now at sort of like 2022. And he stood up this year at this conference, and you can watch the conference on YouTube. It's brilliant. It's phenomenal stuff. 70% of all apps developed will be low code or no code by 2025. 70%. That, think about that. Like, think about, what you have on your tablet, so like you're going on there and you've got all the apps on the App Store, and it's like on the Play Store or whatever it's called this week. And there's hundreds of them, right? Think about how many more there are in business, right? So when we go into businesses and we talk to them, and that's what I do now, I talk to them about their businesses. You find that there's all these point solutions. We call them point solutions, or like, they bought this little thing off the shelf, or they've made this Access workbook, or they've made this Excel file, and they're trying to digitally migrate them over to something new. There is your opportunity as app makers and developers inside of low code, no code, to really transform not only yourselves, but also the business, right? So you can become a partnership which will stand the test of time, because the Excel Access stuff that's been going on for donkey's years, you can directly affect that. So absolutely sensational, right? So let's have a look at some of the people who are building these things, right? So where does Power Apps live inside of the Microsoft ecosystem? Well, the answer is, quite frankly, everywhere these days. I keep finding new little places to find my little purple baby Power Apps living, right? So yes, it lives in SharePoint. You go to SharePoint and you can make a Power App on top of your SharePoint list of your doc library to do stuff, right? And then, like, oh, well, where else did it turn up? Well, it turned up in Azure SQL, right? And inside of Azure SQL, you can say, oh, Azure SQL, make me a Power App out of my SQL database that I've got here. And then really, really cool, inside of like the ERP, finance and operations and finance supply chain management, it's right there again, like, add a Power App. And you're like, wow, this thing's absolutely everywhere, and it gets really cool. And inside of Teams, you can have stuff inside of Teams, and it can be, you can make a Power App and all that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely pervasively everywhere. Same with Power Automate, same sort of thing. We'll get to that in a minute, of what the differences are, right? So like, and then you've got people in the middle there, like Samit, right? And you'll hear a bit more on my mate Samit in a minute, because he's a phenomenal fella. But Samit goes off and builds like simple line of business applications that really change the business. So elevating the paper form, taking away the Excel workbook, removing the Access database, and helping to shine a light on shadow IT. Now, it's one thing, like, for those of you who are maybe watching, who are IT professionals and still sitting there thinking, oh dear, we don't want any of this shadow IT business happening anymore. Well, the brilliant thing is that it absolutely shines a light where the shadows once were, and it eliminates those shadows, and it gives you control of those applications, and with minimal effort, you can secure them and make them part of the value proposition of your business. So that's absolutely incredible. I do apologise. It's absolutely pouring with rain here at the moment, and you might be able to hear that in the background. So I'll speak up a little bit if you can't hear me. And then you've got Mohammed in the middle there. And Mohammed, he's this kind of sales guy, and he was building these pretty advanced business apps that are linked to their ERP, linked to various bits and pieces to do the customer service in locations where traditionally don't have particularly high technical availability inside their organizational geography. So absolutely phenomenal. And then and this is where the professional developer bit, and when I say professional developer, I mean someone who gets paid to develop for a living, right? That's just the only bit here. Everyone's a software engineer, but the only thing that makes it professional is you are paid to do that for a living. That's the only time I'm going to use that professional word inside of there. So it's people who are paid to do it for a living, right? And that's it, just literally, pound notes, right? So you got Evan building these really cool apps that are connected, in this case, to wind turbines and shutting them down when the bad weather comes, right? And then you've got a whole gang of people at the end there, who are creating end-to-end business solutions with multiple apps that do multiple things that are all linked together on top of the same data source or performing similar functions but on different parts of the business that really talk together and complete what Microsoft love to call a digital feedback loop, right? And you know, the notion of the digital feedback loop is this, and you'll hear it a few times, and it's one of these key selling points that I'll give you, is that when you talk about Power Platform, right, and we talk about Power Apps a lot, but part of Power Platform is Power BI, right? And I found this massively inside of my business as I was trundling along. And it was that managers really like charts, right? They love a chart. They like a donut chart. They like a little line graph. They know who's responsible and where there's a little line in the middle that says there's a target that goes over it and all that great stuff. And the problem is with great analytics come great questions, right? So they would turn around and say, well, Keith, you have shown us this beautiful chart that is interactive, but I have all these questions that I want answering over here. And I'd say, well, I haven't got the data for that because it's all on pen and paper, or it doesn't exist, or we don't collect it. It's not live. It's 3 weeks out of date when we get it. So I can never answer that question. And they'd say, well, can you not make some data up? And I'd say, well, no, because that's fundamentally wrong. Then we'd say, okay, right, so let's go and make a Power App and go and collect that data, right? So there's your in, you know, there's one of the ins for Power Platform in any business. Now, you're sitting there thinking, okay, all right, so Power Platform's been around since 2016. It's 6 years and 1 day old today, right? Because it was released on Halloween, purposefully, I think, to terrify IT admins, but as an awkward Halloween joke. But actually, like, you're a lot earlier than you think you are in this journey. Okay, so this is the adoption bell curve, right? I borrowed this one. It's the adoption bell curve. It's a bit of a classic, right? And on the left-hand side is still us lot, right? Is still us lot. We are right at the beginning of everybody else. We still find organizations that have never heard of it. We still find people who are saying, well, what's that? We're not really interested. We don't want to know about it. You've still got those people who are everyone else. And the curve is ramping up. It's starting that uptick. So you guys are on, like, you know, being here today, you're at the beginning. You're at this acceleration, this huge acceleration that's happening in the marketplace at the moment. The number one kind of blocker to digital innovation right at this moment in time is not the tech. I mean, look at what Microsoft's done with Power Apps and Power Platform. They've lowered the barrier to entry so much. But the issue is still that we haven't got enough skilled individuals. Why? Because most of the skilled individuals are sitting inside skilled businesses with all of the bits and pieces in their head, and they can't yet do it. So your job is to go and do it easier with them and go and be their partners and build those apps, or become those app makers inside of your own businesses and really change the world, because you will change the world. You know, if you look at what's happened across kind of the last couple of years, the Power Platform community and the Power Apps community have even got a school, right? So if a community becomes so big these days, you know, that they need a school, then I expect we'll have a Power Apps hospital soon for people with sick apps that need some attention. You know, and that, actually, we kind of do have that with the Power Addicts and Twitter and the forums and stuff. So yeah, we kind of got a hospital. So that community is at a scale now where you're going to get that huge level of support. And quite frankly, when I first started coding way back when, the levels of support that this community gives you are just night and day compared to the traditional tech communities out there. I mean, it's just, people are so willing to help one another out here because they're all at the beginning of the journey, and it's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to do a bit of myth busters now, because I love a bit of myth busting, right? So I'm going to give you some of the biggest hurdles you're going to face on your Power Apps journey, and indeed your Power Platform journey, but you know, your Power Apps journey. And these are going to help to dispel some of the things, and none of them's code, right? You don't have to write a single line of any code of anything whatsoever, right? Ready? Okay, so the first one, right? What is Power Apps? Okay, and this is the very definition of it. It's a service for building apps using custom business apps that connect to your data and work across web and mobile without the time and expense of custom software development. Remember that, because you're going to tell that about 1,500 different ways to people over the years, right? That's just going to happen time and time again, right? The number one thing, and I'm going to use this classic slide. It's a classic slide, right? There's two things that you'll see everywhere in Power Platform. The top bit is the easy bit, and the bottom bit is the professional bit, right? So every time you see one of these bits describing Power Platform, it's going to say easy, and then it's going to say govern and secure, right? Easy, govern and secure. So Power Apps has strong enterprise governance and security. And we're going to get to that myth in a moment. And you're going to be able to do all sorts of cool stuff inside of tablets and phones, right? Like leverage the GPS functionality inside my phone, or, get like the compass bearing, or scan a QR code, or take a picture. You can do all of that straight out the box. Dead simple. I'm going to show you some of that today. You're going to love it, right? But yeah, you're going to be able to do all of that kind of stuff. So myth number one. This is one that I hear all the time, right? When someone starts making Power Apps, the IT admins, and they're always the people you're battling against here, right? They're going to say, "Oh no, it's going to." It means that people can click on Power Apps and access the database at the back end. This is a massive security hole. Let's turn off Power Apps for good. And we say, no, that's not the case at all, because you have to log in to the database, right? It doesn't just automatically give you permissions, right? So when someone says that to you, you use this phrase, right? Power Apps does not elevate your permissions. It's not scary, right? If you can see something in the SharePoint list, you should be able to read and write to it, because you can already do that for the interface. It's only doing what you're already able to do, okay? It's a big point, that, yeah? Right? I don't want my users accidentally dumping all of my sensitive data on social media, right? Another one, right? Where it's like, we don't want people tweeting from a Power App. We don't want people doing this from a Power App. We don't want people doing that from a Power App. Okay, fine, right? You can turn that off. So the first hurdle you're going to have of doing this inside of your business is after you've built your first app. It's going to be around kind of security and data leakage. And they can turn all that stuff off. So you can say to them, right, it is safe. It is secure. Okay. The next thing they're going to say, well, I don't want you and all your mates making these, because I don't want any Tom, Dick or Harriet building apps and blah, blah, blah. And I've got all these other problems going on. Well, there is a bunch of governance tools and apps out there that can help them do that. Right. So now we've dispelled the myth inside of the IT organization, right? Now you're allowed to build your first apps, or you're selling this as an external person into businesses as a contractor or as a partner or something else, right? So it means you have to learn to code. Well, it doesn't. So most of the code in Power Apps comes directly from Excel, okay? So the Excel is exactly the same as Power Apps. The Power FX coding language is built on top of the coding language that lives in Excel. And it did that for a reason, because Excel was the #1 business tool for making apps in the world. Full stop, end of story. There's more lines of code in Excel than there are in any other programming language. I can guarantee it, because you can easily create 1 million lines of code with one click of a button and drag it down, and there's 1 million lines of code, one in each cell, right? So just doing the math, I declare that my brain says that that's true. There is no there's no facts of it other than the fact that I thought that. So there you go. It's not a statistical fact, it's just my facts, but it stands to reason. And the notion here is that Power Apps is not an empirical coding language, right? So if you ever read code, if you ever like looked at an if statement, it says like, if this, then that. And Power Apps can do that, right? Power Apps can do that, but we declare the code in places, right? So we say that instead of we set the position of something on the screen. So you think about Cartesian coordinates like this, right? Think about Cartesian coordinates of X and Y and all that kind of stuff. We remove the ability to say that the X is equal to that, but we say that this is equal to that X, right? So it's inverse. It flips it around the other way. So you end up declaring what X is equal to rather than telling it as equal to. It's much more kind of like directional than it is informative, right? So it's a different way of working, but it's very familiar to Excel because it's like saying that this is equal to that cell over there and this is equal to this thing over there, and that's exactly how Excel works. So if you have any Excel experience, you should know that. Now, sorry, I pressed the wrong key on my keyboard there. Now, I'm going to show you some terrifying code, right? Here's some terrifying code. In fact, this isn't really, although it is sort of code, it's not sort of code. This is JSON, right? This is how Power Apps works behind the scenes. So all the data that flows in and out of your app, all of the records from the database or the SharePoint list or the Excel file or the Bing Maps API or the weather, which is pretty apt at the moment because it's raining here. It's England, what do you expect? It comes into Power Apps as JSON, right? And you can see on the screen there, it actually makes quite a lot of sense, right? Gone are the days of a load of gobbledygook on the screen, a load of just, ones and zeros. If you ever open up an old code file, like it just looks like you'll never be able to read it. You've seen sort of CSI Miami or whatever it is when they're doing the hacking, and it's just all weird symbols of hash this and tag that and blah, blah, blah. You might read it for abnormal money. And this is the data being transformed. So nowadays things come in a nice common language, right, where you can read it and you can see it. And Power Apps just basically sits on top of these things called APIs. It stands for an application programming interface. And it's basically how computers talk to one another. So they have a little handshake and they say, oh, can you show me your identity? And they get their wallet out and they say, yeah, this is me. I'll show you my badge. And the person says, okay, yeah, we know that's you. And then they start sending data to one another, right? And the data these days looks like this. And you'll notice that you can kind of read this. So this is a little kind of demo on articles, authors, and saying what that is. And you can see that like there's a relationship. So there's a lookup to another table, right, called author. Okay, there's a relationship in the middle there. It says relationships author, and the data, the ID for that record is 42, and it's a type people, right? And then down the bottom, we've got things like type, people, ID 42, attributes, John, age 80, gender, male. You can see that you can read that. Like you fundamentally can read that. And when we first started doing this, back in the bad old days, you couldn't. You had to like transform it all and unzip it all. And it was all like you just sit there banging your head against a brick wall trying to read data for some I don't know, like set of car keys or some old weird device that someone had given you a machine. Here's a great example. Machine for reading tickets on buses. Well, you had to be a C programmer to read that and kind of do all this stuff, and it was all gobbledygook and you didn't know what it meant, and you just get these big long numbers that didn't mean anything to you, couldn't tell you a thing. Nowadays, much easier and the barrier's a lot lower. So if you have some Excel experience, and I hope you do, and if you don't worry, like it really isn't, yeah. All the stuff on the screen in front of you is Excel. And I know that I shouldn't be worried about this because my mum and dad can use Excel, right? And if they can use Excel, my dad manages his family tree in it, and my mum does a, infinite number of lists that she does to keep the father organized. But you can use this to sort of turbocharge you. And I found out a few months back that one of a friend of mine who makes computer games, and he said, oh yeah, we play most of the games in Excel. He said we even test out some of the logic, for the models that, like the mathematical models that run it all. And it's like, oh well, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. But all the stuff in green is directly the same as Excel. So, if you think about who uses Excel in a business, traditionally information workers, finance teams, PAs, analysts, just normal managers, they want to sort of get an idea of, so the barriers come down quite a lot. And then all we're doing is adding some common functionality around it. There's probably 4 things on this table that you'll use more than anything else in every app. I'd say that's probably the filter function to filter some data. So like find me all of I use sausages, mash and beans quite a lot in all of my demos. So because food is an easy one. So find me all of the sausages in the list of food and find me all of the peas that aren't mushy in the list of food. Like that's exactly what filter's going to do. And then you might say, look up, we want to return one record where my potato is mashed, right? That kind of stuff. And then you might submit a record. You might turn around and say, well, let's say it's a list of food and you need to change your recipe and say that you're going to add some dairy-free milk to the mashed potato instead of dairy milk, and you're going to create a new non-dairy version of mashed potato. So you might submit a form on top of that data, and there's a submit form thing right there, and you don't even have to write any code. Just put the form on the screen and design it, and we'll show you that in a moment. So what about UX and UI? Now, for those of you who don't know what UX and UI is, UI stands for the user interface and the UX stands for the user experience. They're 2 different things. One of them is the how beautiful your app looks, where all of the where the icons are on the screen and how it all kind of fits together. And the other is how the user actually interacts with your app, right? So like, if you think about that, you really want to have a nice streamlined user experience so that there are less buttons to click on if needed. Like, is the bit that you've put in there to identify what type of food recipe you want to edit, right? So say, okay, I want to change the recipe for dairy from dairy to non-dairy. How easy was it? How many clicks did I have to go through? Did it make sense to the user coming to do that? Or was it obscured and I had to explain it in a certain way? Did I actually streamline the business process by doing it? And that's the job of the UX designer. So inside of Power Apps, there's lots of different roles and you can fulfill those roles. So you can be a UX designer. You can sort of sit there and work with people to reduce the amount of things on the screen, reduce the complexity of the app. And when I say the complexity of the app, I mean the visual complexity of the app. There is a lovely old adage about kind of conceptual simplicity, but structural complexity. The best example of that is the car, right? You've got a brake in an automatic car. You've got a stick to make it go, an accelerator, a brake, and a steering wheel, and some flashy things to tell other drivers which way you want to go. All of the complexities of that car are behind the dashboard. Simple as you like. You don't even need a rev meter, just a speedo to keep you legal, right? But if you think about the structural complexity of a car versus its conceptual simplicity, that's the job of the UX and the UI designer, and it's the people who write the complex code behind it that's going to do that. And I'm not going to say difficult bit, because both of those 2 jobs are difficult to really streamline that complexity down. So if you're coming at this today and you're sitting there going, okay, I'm not too sure about, I really want to write loads of complex code to talk to a database. Look, that's fine. You know, if you have a look at Christine Kolajetsky, right? So she's currently doing a UI UX series on Power Apps, and the number of people that have signed up to it have been off the charts. Like, everyone wants to know how to make their apps look better, how to make them look expensive, how to make them look and behave like they're a joy to use rather than cumbersome, right? You want them to be nice and friendly and, yada, yada, yada. So to do that, Microsoft said, well, okay, Excel is the most common coding language we've got. What's the most common layout tool we've got? Well, PowerPoint, of course. I mean, my presentation's done in PowerPoint now. People they will come to know PowerPoint warriors. So Microsoft basically said, we're gonna make this thing like PowerPoint. Now, I'm being slightly cheeky because this is an old interface from Power Apps here. where you can see screens down the side. They don't do that anymore. It's a tree view, but I'll show you that in just one moment. So you'll see that in Power Apps and how that gets to put together. Now, the number one thing, if you're going to do App in a Day and go off and do that skills challenge, right? The number one thing that I want you to take away, and I want to explain this to you today, is the anatomy of the Power Apps screen. Nothing confuses people more on App in a Day than the anatomy of the Power Apps screen, right? Like it's giving you all these bits of code to put in places, and all the challenges and labs give you all the bits of skills to put in places. So we're just going to kind of quickly go through what the anatomy of the screen is, because I think it's really important. And in my experience, teaching people this has kind of really turbocharged them. So in the middle of the screen, this is the Power Apps interface, and this is the most common one, although they've just changed it in the last couple of days. So the top ribbon bar is ever so slightly different, but everything underneath that very top bar is the same, right? So that is the canvas, and that's where you put your controls, okay? That's where you put your controls on the screen, your items on the screen that your users are going to interact with, or you're going to store stuff in, you're going to do bits with it, okay? On the top of the screen is the standard Office 365 toolbar, also known as the ribbon. Okay, so that's like that bit that's at the top. In the new Power Apps, it's context sensitive. It's really cool. It saves you a bit of screen real estate, and you'll come to value your screen size massively. On the left-hand side are the sidebar and container panels, right? So these are all of these little kind of the tree view there. You'll see all of the controls on the screen. So you can see there I've got my screen, and inside of that I've got that button. And that's the best place to go to kind of select something, because you can go and search and you can find it, and and you'll rename your controls to things that make sense, because that's really good practice. And that will help. On the right-hand side, you've got this, this properties and advanced panel. Now there's two bits here. Properties, and when it talks about properties and advanced, properties are the kind of the no code piece, right? So this is where you've got a nice visual skin to do format the text, or change the background, or fill color, or adjust the padding of something. The common things you do in PowerPoint, or link something to a data source. That's the nice sort of most user friendly bit, is the properties, right? So if you ever stuck, go to the properties. Most of the stuff's there. If you come in at this with no experience whatsoever, most of the stuff of what you need to do commonly is there. And then you've got the advanced panel. So you click on that advanced panel, it will show you every single item, every single thing in that control in a list. Show you the whole thing in a group. Down the bottom, and this one hardly anybody uses, drives me bonkers. But there's a zoom bar there. It's really powerful, so you can zoom in and out of that. But off to the left-hand side there, where it says a screen, when I've got a control selected, I can see the hierarchy of all of the objects that thing lives inside. So let's say I've got a button inside of a form inside of a screen, right? And I just want to select the form easily. And it might be really deep. It might be like 5 or 6 deep, or I've got like containers and groups and all that kind of weird stuff on the screen, right? And I just want to, I know what I want to, and it sort of, Power Apps wasn't quite clever enough to figure out where I wanted to click, because they're all layered on top of one another. But I've got the button selected, and it's shown me the hierarchy, and okay, I know that one. Boom, there you go. I select it. Really nice and fast, really contextual, absolutely brilliant. Don't leave it alone. Right. So now, after the canvas, the number one place you're going to do 99.999% of your workload is right here in the formula bar, right? And the formula bar is exactly the same as Excel. So you go into Excel, you've got this little FX bit in Excel, that's exactly the same, and you can get suggestions exactly like you do in Excel. And off to the left-hand side here, where it says fill, right? You can click on that, and it will give you an alphabetized list of all the behaviors and properties for the control you've got selected. So that's really powerful, right? Really powerful. So anything you've got selected on the screen, everything to do with that control that's a property that you can affect will be in there. There's occasionally properties that you can't affect that are in there, right? Like there'll be values that it spits out that's like if something is selected, or am I selected, yes or no, that kind of stuff. But 99.9% of the things you can affect with your formulas are inside that bar, right? On the right hand side, we've got some power effects, which is a simple color. And all it is setting the color of that screen to white. RGBA, red, green, blue, and alpha, which is transparency. And then we've got some values in there for doing that. You could use a hex value in there. You could use the color white. You could use the color black. You could use the color red, green, brown. All those kinds of things are in there. So it will meet you roughly where your level of skill is inside a Power Platform. So let's have a demo. So I am in my lovely Power App. I'm going to show you. This is the Power App that you make at the moment when you start. So this is our. Let me just zoom in to make the screen a bit bigger so you can all see it. One moment. Zoom, zoom, zoom. So this is App in a Day, and this is the very, very hyper realistic coffee ordering app. That every organisation has when you need to order a new coffee machine that costs £21,000. So highly realistic. But I want you to take a few moments to appreciate what this app is. Okay, so this is App in a Day. This is what you build. You build this coffee machine ordering app, right? And down the side here, you have a gallery, right? A list of machine types, which you import from Excel. You import this Excel file and it's got some machine types in it. And you say, right, machine types go here and the machines go over here. And you notice when I clicked on these buttons, it filtered, it changed this gallery on the right-hand side here. Okay, change this gallery on the right-hand side here. And if I look at what it's filtering there, remember I said about my sausages and my mash and my beans and stuff? This is my filter statement, right? So filter the machines, yeah, where the machine type ID is equal to this gallery over here, this thing here, this selection of different machine types, where my type ID is the same as my machine type ID. And all it is in Excel, there's two tables which have got an ID column like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And it matches to the other table, which has got lots of records on it. And some of them are 1s, some of them are 2s, some of them are 3s, some of them are 4s, right? Just like some of my clothes are blue and some of my clothes are pink, and that sort of thing, right? But I would select all my blue clothes, select all my pink clothes. That's how it works. Now, just think about that for a moment, right? Think about what that enables you to do. Now, if we want to kind of go and compare some machines, it allows you to do that, right? You can go and compare those two items, and then you can select the one that you want to buy, right? Now, and you can submit that. So think about business applications, and specifically business applications. Those of you who are coming to learn how to make games in Power Apps and you want to be a game developer, you can do that here. But Power Platform, Power Apps is primarily designed for forms over data, okay? So with that in mind, what I'm saying is that the ability to filter data, to find a record, right, to act upon that record and to record some values against that record is fundamental to business applications. And it's been the same since the 70s. And we still haven't got enough of them. Think back to the beginning with the 500 million apps and the 70% of apps in low code, no code development. This is why businesses need to do this every single day of the week ad nauseum, again and again and again and again and again, right? And all you're doing is decorating the data in this form differently, right? So I said about that submit form, right? So here's my form. I literally just kind of connected it to the data source called machine orders, right? Which I built. And there's there's my data source machine orders. If I want to put some more fields on there, I can add fields from the data source. They're already there. I just pick them off and say who's the approver. We can add that one to it, right? And the approver comes down here, and I can make that required at the data source, and it will be reflected in here. And that submit, to actually write it back to the database, I just use that submit form. I didn't have to write any crazy code. I didn't have to spend hours and weeks learning how to make a HTTP request that, you know, is authenticated and, you know, then goes and sends the SQL statement to the server to update that particular record and yardy-dardy. Oh my goodness, you know, by that time you're actually fed up of even thinking of becoming a developer because you've had 300 million error statements at the bottom of your code, and you can't, and you know, all you just want to do is switch off and go read a telly, you know, go watch a telly, read a book, have a cup of tea, and give up. I know, I was there, I've done it, I've you know, given up programming more times than I've started it. Well, maybe not more times, maybe one less time actually, because otherwise I wouldn't be here. But it's really cool, right? It's really cool. It's really, really powerful. So like I said about decorating data. Okay, so we can decorate some data. So if I think about what Power Apps lets me do, I wanted to say to you all today about like the ease of this, and it might this might terrify some people in terms of their information security, but Power Apps is going to ask you for permission right before it does this. Okay, so I can literally get my location, and from that I can get my altitude, my latitude, my longitude, all that kind of stuff, right? So I just got my geolocation from an app by writing that. I'm just going to let that sink in for a moment, right? For the developers in the room, who, you know, hardcore devs, like that was all it took. That was all that was needed. So potentially your kind of ability to execute, to do this, is just completely changed, right? The same with, and it's very difficult to show this on a monitor because it like literally, you know, want to add a picture, microphone support, you know, barcode, measuring camera, right? So think about the demo, right? To your business partners and stuff when you're walking in, and they say, right, I've got oh, here we go, sausage, mash and beans. I've got this plate. I've got this dish that I've made, and I know my sausage, mash and beans, and my dish occupies this amount of space, and I want to get the right size plate. So you know, you're going to go around and measure some plates. So you can actually measure the size of the plate with the phone inside the Power App, and it's done for you. Like you put that on the screen, they click the button, they do the measurement, and the measurement spat out, and you do something with that measurement. You submit the form. You know that bit you don't have to think about because it's built for you, right? That's hugely cool, because all of a sudden, all of the stuff that the people who got paid to develop professionally and like hard old school had to write that bit to get the stuff out the bus ticket machine and actually make the screen on the ticket machine work and do all this ticket machine stuff. That's all gone. That's all gone. And you can level the playing field in ways that you've never leveled it before. And I'll show you a couple more apps, right? Here's a great fun little app. I built this as a demo for a customer, for a company I went to do a talk at. They own trees in Sweden, a phenomenal country, and a phenomenal company. And I used that geolat-long thing, right? And I want to sort of like talk to the Excel people in the audience now. And you can see there that I've got my kind of latitude and longitude. And I'll zoom in so you can see it. I've got latitude and longitude there for that tree, right? That was the stamp I made in the database. And I've got my distance to the tree updated from my laptop. And all I've done is literally, see all this complicated maths down the bottom? I pinched it from Excel. It's the same as Excel. So I literally just pasted it in. And then I kind of went, okay, why are these two things up to the latitude and the longitude of the two Excel cells instead of being the Power Apps ones? And it worked, right? So secrets out the bag, guys. You can do that. So that complex bit of maths is just taken care of. It wasn't actually. That's probably the most difficult bit of code I've written in the Power App in forever, right? Well, you can see that, this piece of text here is referred to in the gallery, and it's not too difficult to read. It's not too difficult to understand. Getting the map is just a simple case of kind of, passing off to the Bing Maps connector and saying, here's my latitude and longitude. Can you return me a map of this size, please? And it goes and does it, right? You don't need to be the world's greatest programmer. You just need to have the ability to join all of the business logic together. And then I want to show you this one last one. So this is an app that should never be built, right? Because it was an Excel process. It was for a company where I used to work on the big red buses, right? And they had a hire business, really lovely thing. People come in at the weekend and they drive wedding buses for people, and they go to special events. And so, but managing the actual the operation of all those things, where they were going, who was driving the bus, getting the bus fueled, ready, this, that, and the other, very complicated, right? Hugely complicated. And they had loads of Excel and old websites and this, that, and the other to kind of have people book. So we basically built a Power App for doing that, and it spans a data model. It spans an absolute data model. So this is all the way across, and you can see here, look, I left a little error in here for you guys. So you can see Power Apps is telling me I've got something wrong. There's something wrong in that formula. So it's looking after me, right? It's looking after me. It's telling me where the problem is. So your code is so much more visual. Your problems are so much more visual on the screen. But if you think about this, there's an infinite number of things this way. So there's a customer, there's trips. So there's one customer to many hires. There's many hires to many buses. Okay. There's some trips to each hire. There's invoices, there's all this stuff, and it brings it all together in one screen. Nice, simple app for the workers to understand, and it massively democratizes the technology in a way that it wasn't before. So let me just jump back to this. All right, lovely thing. Oh, hang on, there we go. And we'll wrap up for some questions and just flick through that. So traditional IT development is a bit fraught. Normally, it's developers talking to IT with users and just like unhappy finance directors because they're paying so much money from it. With Power Apps, development is a team sport, right? But you have to play as part of the team. And it's the greatest thing that I've had to learn. So in the middle of the makers, you guys, you're all super excited to do this. Everyone wants to make Power Apps. Let's make 1 million of them tomorrow. Let's change your organization and the face of the earth. And I totally get where you're coming from on that, right? But you have to learn to play as part of the team, right? So you've got to work with IT. You can't not work with IT. And then more importantly than that, you've got to work with your users, right? They will feed you everything you need to be successful because they're the ones that are hungry for your help, and you can teach them along the way, right? So you'll just have these managers on the top, and they're like, and you've got to manage the managers and all the rest of it. So I'm going to give you a couple of people here to sort of take away and have a read of their story. So Vanessa, Standard Bank in Africa. They go out, they service cash machines for Standard Bank in places where there are no Wi-Fi, and they're using Power Apps to do it. If you think it's not a professional bit of development, our Standard Bank, they're servicing their cash machines. We've got to say that again, cash machines, right? Nick Gill, when he was working for American Red Cross, a lady called Kathy built an app to help understand what and where everybody was as a hurricane was making landfall. So the wind was blowing, and they were waiting for this hurricane to land. And a day or two, they built an app to find out where everyone was using that latitude and longitude on the screen that I showed you, and they asked whether they needed help and all the rest of it, right? Completely changed the way it worked. No pen and paper. They deployed that to the entire organization with a click of a button as the hurricane was coming. And then Eric's boss said that they don't they shouldn't be allowed the technology that they've got, right? Because it's beyond their reach. They've got, the biggest family-run Pepsi bottling company in the States, but they're using the technology that enterprises use, like big banks use, big industry uses, and they're like, this shouldn't be allowed. We shouldn't really be playing with this because it's so powerful. But we are. They've got AI builder. They've got all this stuff. This is incredible. We would never have been allowed to play with this, and they've been invited along for the party. So that's tremendous. And then you've got people like Samit, and Samit is the original non-developer. Samit was a security guard at Heathrow Airport. He asked you to take your liquids, laptops, and iPads out of your bag before you put them in. And Samit went off and he built a bunch of apps. And then Samit didn't stop there. Rather than stopping, he brought other people along for the journey. And the next thing you know, I met Samit. I was really scared because I was like, oh God, this guy's made so many apps and he's really cool. But I was a total imposter. But Samit's the nicest guy in the world, and he says, if I can do it, you can do it, and there's no excuse. So he went off and he taught other people to make apps. And this is Naz. Naz made an app, and I remember I met Naz, and she said, I took this home and I sort of showed my partner, and he said, oh, I don't believe you made that. And she was like, well, I did, and you're in trouble now, But she made apps because Samit made apps because they helped one another and they partnered and they kind of made it easier. And that's what I'm saying to you. Like, everyone here today is capable of doing it. If you could use the technology to get on this call today, you can use the technology to make an app tomorrow. So you guys have totally got this. The people who you really want to pay attention to are these people. So this is Terry. Terry's a real person. Terry washes the undersides of buses out. I knew Terry. He's a mate of mine. And that's a horrible job. And Terry used to get a bit of paper on a clipboard and go and wash the buses out and tick it off that he'd done it. But when the bus is clean underneath, he sees things that no one else sees. No one else spends as much time looking under the bus and washing it as Terry and seeing where all the problems are. And Terry was able to feel like a real member of the community, a real person in the business, because all of a sudden his technology was democratized. He was given access to things that he should never have been given access to in his world. So I get a clipboard, it's got pen and paper on it, I wash the bus, I take it off. All of a sudden he's got an app that's usable, that's part of the journey, that means that he can really be part of it. And when you give someone an app, I think it's expensive. And they think that there's been investment and they feel valued. And that is probably the greatest thing that you will all do after spending time on this course. Is you won't change the world with the technology you write. You'll change the world of the people who use your technology. Anyway, thank you very much. And please, if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat.
Hi, Keith. There's no questions in the chat, but obviously you had people from all over the world. So you had someone from Sweden, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi. Join in. Surrey, UK. Join in the chat. So sorry about my dog. She usually barks at the rain. I just wanted to remind everyone of the Cloud Skills Challenge. You can scan the QR code. All of the modules, all of the topics we'll be covering in this amazing series are all in this Cloud Skills Challenge. So you can scan the QR code and learn more, basically. So yeah, that's it. I'm afraid we don't have any questions, Keith, but thank you very much for today. And to everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Keith on either LinkedIn or Twitter. But yeah, do scan the Cloud Skills Challenge. I know it's a little bit of an additional learning, but yeah, thanks everyone. And thanks very much, Keith. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon. Keep dry.